All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating framework called the state of supersedence. The whole idea behind it is pretty urgent. It argues that to stop a total system collapse, we first have to be brutally honest about how our system is already failing.
So here's the central question the source material wants us to think about. How can just one single event act like an X-ray for an entire society? How can one moment in time expose all the hidden cracks and fractures in the very foundation of how we live? It's this idea of using a major event, not just as history, but as a diagnostic tool.
And this whole framework we're exploring, it comes from a group called the Emergent Reality Network. And the diagnostic tool they use for their analysis is the 9/11 attacks. Now, what they do is use that event to lay out what they see as deep systemic failures. We're going to walk through their 5 very different ways of interpreting that one single moment.
And this is where we get to the heart of it all. The source lays out these 5 distinct models of failure. You have to understand, each one presents a completely different reality, a different diagnosis of what's wrong, and, as we're about to see, a totally different prescription for what to do next.
Think of this table as our roadmap for the rest of this explainer. It lays out the 5 types of failure, everything from corruption all the way down to acquisition. Each one gets a color-coded revolution status and a very specific action required. So let's break these down one by one.
All right, first up, we've got level red, failure by corruption. Now, according to this model, this is the most extreme diagnosis you can make. The argument isn't just that the system is broken by accident, it's that it was broken on purpose.
So the core claim here is that the system isn't just flawed, it's actively malicious. This point of view, from the source, suggests the event was the result of an unrepairable systemic flaw, all driven by a 1% that's just out for its own gain and that will stop at nothing to get what it wants.
So if you believe the system is fundamentally corrupt, what do? Well, the only action is to rebuild. We're talking a complete, radical deconstruction of our institutions. The source calls for replacing them with things like a tech-enabled direct democracy and a totally new economic model, one based on the earth as a kind of universal commons. Basically, you start from scratch.
Next up, we have level orange, failure by incompetence. This interpretation shifts the blame away from deliberate malice and points the finger squarely at sheer ineptitude. The problem isn't that the system is evil, it's that it's just useless.
The logic here is pretty straightforward. If a country has the most advanced, most expensive military complex in the history of the world, and it still can't prevent an attack like this, well, then that power is effectively useless when it comes to keeping people safe. It completely undermines faith in the government's ability to do its most basic job.
So what's the fix for incompetence? The action required is to replace. Now, this is totally different from the first model. You're not tearing everything down, you're working within the existing system. The idea is you elect new leaders, you pass some new laws, and you trust the slow, methodical process of the system to eventually get things right.
Okay, the third model, level yellow, takes a completely different tack. It looks for the cause outside the nation's borders. It frames the failure as one of oppression, arguing that the real problem is how the country acts on the world stage.
This argument basically says that the event wasn't some random act of senseless hate, but was a direct result of blowback. The source suggests that if a group despises a nation's way of life that much, maybe it's because that nation's actions are seen as universally offensive, and its foreign policies are perceived as a direct threat.
And the action required for this one? It's reform. See, the goal isn't to rebuild or replace the system itself, but to change its behavior, especially its external behavior. So this means creating better foreign policies, building stronger international relationships, and tackling the kind of global economic inequality that might be fueling all that resentment. Okay, get ready for a pretty dramatic shift here. Model 4, level blue, is failure by acquiescence. This one turns the diagnostic tool away from the government entirely and points it right at us, the general public.
I mean, this is a really powerful idea, right? The source argues that the ultimate failure lies with the citizens, that through our own inaction or our ignorance or maybe even our fear, we are directly responsible for what our leaders do. The problem, from this point of view, isn't them, it's us.
And that leads to a totally different kind of solution. Reflect. This isn't about a political revolution, it's about a personal one. The call to action is to look inward, to evaluate our own behavior, to learn how to consume less, and to start using our daily choices, what we buy, what we support, as a way of voting for the kind of world we actually want. And that brings us to the fifth and final interpretation presented in this material, level green, failure by acquisition. And this one is framed as the cynical worldview of the 1%. From this perspective, the system isn't broken at all. In fact, it's working exactly as intended. Tragedies like this, they're just seen as acceptable collateral damage. Just the cost of doing business to consolidate power and make a profit. For those at the top, everything is going according to plan.
So the action required here, and the source presents this with some deep, deep sarcasm, is to rejoice. Celebrate the empire, invest in the companies that profit from conflict, and just cling to the idea that money will protect you. It's a really stark critique of a mindset that sees opportunity in chaos.
So when you put the two extremes of this framework side by side, the contrast is just staggering. On one end, you have this belief that the system is so corrupt it has to be completely torn down and rebuilt, and on the other end, you have the belief that the system is working perfectly for those it's designed to benefit. It just shows you the huge range of realities this framework is trying to capture.
So after laying out these 5 competing realities, the source doesn't just stop there. It doesn't just leave it at analysis. It moves directly to a call for mobilization. So what are you supposed to do with all this information?
The directive is a very clear 3-step process: educate, organize, and mobilize. And the stated goal is completely unambiguous. It's revolutionary. The goal is to dismantle the United States of the corporations. It's a direct challenge to the entire power structure.
And to really drive this point home, the material closes with a series of really powerful declarations, defining the identity of this movement they're proposing. It invokes the collective power of Anonymous, the Legion, and the 99%, and it frames them as this unified, determined, and, frankly, inescapable force for change. And that leaves us with the final question, which is really the entire point of this whole diagnostic framework. After seeing these 5 different lenses, corruption, incompetence, oppression, acquiescence, and acquisition, the source turns it all back to you, and it asks, which one of these best explains your reality? The choice, it suggests, is yours to make.